I've been instructed that we can talk a little bit if we like. So you can ask me things or tell me things. There's somebody right there.
I'm really struck by your talk foregrounded how much some of our organizations like the Art Museum, where I fell in love with the history of art, comes out of the 19th century. And it suggests for me the challenge that this generation has to keep moving forward in reaching audiences. As we see films and blues music, we can see the variety of approaches to the artistic impulse that people have. And I'm wondering if you have ideas, suggestions, beginnings of thoughts about sort of crossover from that 19th century model to the 20th, 21st century model.
And you know, and that's a tricky thing because, I mean, part of this is my own, you know, I think everyone has a technology threshold, you know, and mine is ATMs and Space Invaders, you know, and everything after that I think, wow, what'll they think of next, you know, right? So I can't answer the electronic part. You know, one of the things that I think is really interesting about that 19th century-ness of museums is that it's a really powerful attraction. So that on the one hand, like bells and whistles and websites and, you know, and talking cell phones to get people to come. And then once they get there, I mean, I have kids, you know, 9 and 7 now, and they're all about the sort of timeless quality or the quality of being in another time of a museum, you know. And they started when they were very little at the Harvard Natural History Museum, those long display cases with the stuffed animals, you know, and they're just like, this is the greatest place on earth, right? So I think it's that tricky negotiation of deploying all the technology at your disposal to get people into those hallways that smell the way they've always smelled, you know, and then they get that up their nose and they never want to leave, right? And so I don't think it's simply a matter of like, you know, like we gotta like dress these things up, you know. And I remember being a kid and going to the museum in Chicago, the technology museum. Museum of Science, right? And it was a push-button museum, but it was already archaic. You know, there was like John Deere tractors and stuff in it, you know, and then you push the button and like it would sort of make this analog thing move along, you know. And its archaic quality was in fact most of the appeal for me. You know, the fact that it was the gee whiz moment of 20 years ago was what kind of did it for me. So I think there's this very, you know, and I'm sure you can use, you know, whatever's 3 steps after Twitter to get people in the door, but I think getting them in the door then gets them into that sense of another time that I think is or of no time that I think is so deeply satisfying. I think there's a person right there.
What do you think it is about the agents of screening, if I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
that some get it and some don't? What gets through to the ones who back a water fire
Right.
doesn't make it progress?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think a lot of the work I do is about how individual characters, who are often quite messy people, right, live the consequences of these big structural transformations. And sometimes the answer really does lie in the individual character's ability to, you know, cold read people with money and pitch their project, you know, and I think both Patricia Johansson, who's a famous landscape artist, has done tons of work all over the world, and Mark Kaziri, who's, you know, a custodian at the post office, and they both were extremely passionate and completely understood the Marciano House, but neither one was particularly good at pitching it to other people, especially in City Hall, right? So I think that people in City Hall were only ready to see Patricia Johansson as kind of a elite outsider who'd been to Bennington in the 60s and was coming in telling them how to live. And I remember the mayor's aide saying, you know, Mary Waldron saying, well, the first time Mark grabbed my arm, you know, that was it. You know, like I'm not doing business with this guy. So some of it really comes down to individual. I mean, Barnaby Evans, I think, is a master at pitching his work and showing why it's important. You know, but there's something else too that I think that goes into the sort of the appeal of the pitch for water fires, that it has very soft edges. You know, the idea that people can just wander in And that it's not like, Broadway theater, it starts at 8, you need to buy a ticket, right? That the very soft edges of Waterfire, I think, makes it really appealing to corporate funders, and really appealing to small business owners who aren't going to give them $1 million, but who might, say, oh, this will bring some more people into my restaurant or whatever it is, right? And I think so some of it is that like combination of soft edges and a character at the center of it who can pitch it, and I think both, in the case of Brockton, I think you couldn't find two people more deeply engaged. I remember the two of them talking about like wallpaper, and saying, yeah, I remember that wallpaper, the Marcianos had it, and Patricia Johansson, I think my aunt had that in Brooklyn, and they were just like, they were transported to the 50s by this idea of this wallpaper. It wasn't even in front of them, But somebody had to get the mayor to do that, and there wasn't anybody, and she had an intercessor at the Fuller Art Museum who would have been capable of doing that, and she lost that connection through illness, right? And that, I think, was part of the problem. There would have been somebody local who could say, I'm excited about this, and let me show you how to be excited about this. And you need that chain. And I just don't think that, in the case of Brockton, I just don't think that chain was extended all the way.
Carlo, that's it for our time, I'm afraid.
Okay.
But folks, I'd like to give another round of applause for Carlo Vitale.